Under the vast, bruised sky of the Texas Panhandle, where the wind howled like a lonesome wolf and lightning cracked the heavens open, rode Elias Thorne. He was a cowboy of the old breed, leather-skinned from decades under the relentless sun, his Stetson pulled low over eyes that had seen too much sorrow and not enough sunrise. At 52, Elias was a ghost on his own ranch, the Double Star, where the cattle lowed softly against the thunder, oblivious to the tempest brewing. But tonight, as rain lashed his oilskin coat like 1,000 accusing fingers, Elias felt the storm wasn't just in the clouds, it was clawing at the hollow ache in his chest, the one that had settled there since Sarah left him for the cold earth 5 years back. He'd promised her, on their wedding day beneath the same endless blue that now turned black, that he'd always put family first, that their love would be the fence holding back the world's wild edges. But promises, like barbed wire, could rust and snap under time's weight. Sarah's cancer had stolen her quick as a coyote in the night, leaving Elias with a daughter, Lila, who at 12 had eyes too old for her face and a silence that spoke volumes. Lila barely spoke to him anymore, her days filled with school and Amarillo and her nights lost in books about far-off places where daddies didn't drown their grief in whiskey and endless rides. Elias knew he was failing her, just as he'd failed Sarah. Tonight, with the storm chasing him home from checking the herd, he wondered if the thunder was her voice, calling him to account. The hook came sharp as a spur, a flash of headlights piercing the downpour, then a screech of tires skidding off the mud-slick road that bordered his land. Elias yanked his horse, Old Thunder, to a halt, heart pounding like a Mustang's hooves. He spurred toward the wreck, the rain blinding him, but instinct guiding true. There, crumpled against a mesquite thicket, was a beat-up Ford pickup, its front end smashed into a fence post, steam hissing from the hood like a dragon's breath. And spilling out from the passenger door, a young woman, no more than 25, clutching a squirming toddler to her chest, her face pale as moonlight, blood trickling from a gash on her forehead. "Ma'am. Hold on." Elias bellowed over the gale, dismounting in a splash of mud. He reached them in strides, his calloused hands gentle as he pried the door wider. The woman, Maria, he'd learn later, looked up at him with eyes wide as saucers, terror and defiance warring in their depths. She was Hispanic, her dark hair plastered to her skin, wearing a threadbare jacket that spoke of miles traveled on empty tanks and emptier hopes. The truck's cab was a chaos of duffel bags, a child's stuffed bear, and faded photos spilling onto the floorboard, snapshots of a life uprooted, chasing the American dream from some border town far south. "It's okay, I've got you," Elias said, his voice steady as the ranch's ancient oak. He scooped the toddler, a boy no older than 3, with chubby cheeks streaked with tears, into one arm while helping Maria to her feet. She winced, her ankle twisting under her, but she didn't cry out. Instead, she whispered in Spanish, "Mi hijo, por favor, no lo dejes, my son, please don't leave him." Elias didn't speak the language fluently, but he'd picked up enough from the hands on his ranch over the years. He nodded, fierce. "I won't. Not a soul tonight." As he half-carried them toward his horse, the unexpected twist unfurled like a lasso in the dark, from the truck's back seat, a faint groan. Another figure, an older man, Maria's father, Elias guessed, with silver hair matted in blood, his leg pinned awkwardly under the dashboard. Elias cursed under his breath, the storm's fury mirroring his own. He couldn't leave him. Tying Old Thunder's reins to a post, he waded back through the torrent, prying at the wreckage with bare hands until his knuckles bled. Minutes stretched like hours, lightning illuminating the man's lined face, eyes fluttering open, locking onto Elias with a gratitude that pierced deeper than any raindrop. By the time Elias got them all to the ranch house, a miles grueling trek, Maria limping on his arm, the boy riding his shoulders, the old man slung over the saddle, the storm had eased to a mournful drizzle. The kitchen glowed warm under the flicker of a lantern, the scent of strong coffee brewing as Elias settled them by the fire. Maria's name was Maria Ruiz, she confessed over mugs of the steaming brew, her English halting but earnest. They'd been driving from El Paso, chasing whispers of work at a dairy farm up north. Her father, Tomas, had taken a bad fall weeks back, and the boy, little Javier, was all the family she had left after her husband vanished into the shadows of debt and despair. "We thought the road would lead us home," she said, voice cracking, "but it just broke." Elias listened, his own scars itching like fresh brands. He saw Sarah in Maria's weary strength, Lila in Javier's wide-eyed wonder as he clutched that sodden bear. For the first time in years, the ranch didn't feel like a tomb, it felt alive, pulsing with the raw humanity of strangers who needed him. But doubt not, Lila would be home from her aunt's soon, and what would she think of this? Of him, playing savior to folks who looked nothing like them? As Tomas dozed by the hearth, his breathing ragged, Elias stepped onto the porch, the night air thick with petrichor. Stars peeked through the clouds now, winking like old friends. "What promise am I breaking this time?" he muttered to the dark. Little did he know, the night was just beginning to whisper its truth. Dawn crept over the horizon like a shy promise, painting the double-star ranch in hues of rose and gold, but Elias Thorne hadn't slept. He'd spent the night in vigil, bandaging Tomas's leg with supplies from the barn, fashioning a splint from fence slats and old leather straps, rocking Javier when nightmares clawed him awake, humming a half-forgotten lullaby Sarah used to sing, and sharing quiet stories with Maria over the kitchen table, tales of border crossings and dreams deferred that mirrored his own buried longings. The wreck had been no accident of fate but a cruel caprice, black ice on the curve, the truck's tires bald from too many unpaid miles. Elias had called the sheriff before the lines went down in the storm, but help was hours away, snowed under by flooded roads. As the first light filtered through the lace curtains Sarah had sewn, an unexpected turn galloped in on horseback, Lila. She burst through the door unannounced, her school backpack slung over one shoulder, cheeks flushed from the ride on her pony from Aunt May's. "Dad? I hitched a ride back early, there's this science fair thing." Her words trailed off as she took in the scene, the strangers by the fire, the bloodied rags in the sink, Elias's mud-caked boots tracking the hull. Her green eyes, Sarah's eyes, narrowed in confusion, then flared with something sharper. Hurt. Betrayal. Who are they? Why are you? Elias rose, hands outstretched like a man approaching a spooked colt. "Lila, darlin', it's not what, it's exactly what it looks like. They needed help. The truck flipped last night, right on our fence line." He gestured to Maria, who offered a tentative smile, Javier peeking from behind her skirt like a fawn. But Lila's face crumpled, the dam of her silence breaking in a flood. "You always do this. You ride off into the night, leave me with Aunt May, and come back smelling like regret." "Mom wouldn't," she choked on the words, tears spilling hot and fast. "Mom promised we'd stick together." "You promised." The room held its breath, the crackle of the fire the only sound. Tomas stirred, his voice a gravelly rumble from the cot. "Nina," he said softly to Lila, switching to English with effort, "your father, he is a good man. Last night, the storm took our wheels, but he carried us through the dark. Like an angel with a lasso." Javier toddled forward then, the boldest soul among them, clutching his bear and offering it up to Lila with grubby hands. "Pue," he lisped, his innocence a bridge across the chasm. In that moment, profound realization struck Elias like lightning's afterglow. All these years, he'd clung to Sarah's promise as a chain, not a compass, using grief as an excuse to drift alone, forgetting that selflessness wasn't about grand gestures but the quiet choice to open your fence to the lost. He saw it now, Lila's anger wasn't at the strangers, it was at the walls he'd built around his heart, walls that kept her out too. Maria watched him, her gaze steady, and whispered, "A promise isn't kept in words, Señor. It's kept in the doing." The emotional climax built like a crescendo in the wind. Elias knelt before Lila, pulling her into his arms despite her stiff resistance. "You're right, baby girl. I've been a fool, riding circles around my own pain instead of facing it with you. Your mom, she made me promise to love fierce, to be the kind of man who doesn't turn away. And last night, these folks, they reminded me what that looks like. He glanced at Maria and Tomas, Javier now giggling as Lila hesitantly accepted the bear. I can't fix the road that broke for them, or the years I lost for us. But I can start now. Will you help me? Help them? Lila's shoulders shook, then softened, her small hand finding his. Yeah, Dad. I will. Together, father and daughter turned to their guests. Elias loaded the old truck with supplies from the pantry, canned goods, blankets, a spare tire from the shed, and scrawled a note to the dairy farm boss, vouching for honest work. But the true generosity unfolded in the barn. Elias hitched Old Thunder to a flatbed wagon, offering to drive them the remaining 100 miles himself once the roads cleared. No charge, he said, clapping Tomas on the shoulder. Just pay it forward when you can. Maria's eyes brimmed, and she pressed a silver locket into Lila's palm, a family heirloom, simple but shining. For the girl who shares her home, she said. As they rolled out under the strengthening sun, Javier waving from the wagon's edge, the air hummed with unspoken bonds forged in crisis. Back at the ranch, as sheriff's lights finally crested the hill, Elias and Lila sat on the porch swing Sarah had loved, the world washed clean by the storm. You know, Lila said, leaning her head on his shoulder, that little boy. He said you were a cowboy hero. Like in the stories Mom told. Elias chuckled, throat tight. Nah, darlin'. Heroes are just folks who keep their promises when it's hard. The sun climbed higher, gilding the horizon, and in that light, Elias felt Sarah's whisper, not in thunder, but in the warmth of his daughter's hand in his. The night had changed everything, reminding him that humanity's power lies not in standing alone against the gale, but in linking arms to weather it together. And so, under that boundless Texas sky, Elias Thorne rode forward, not into the dark, but toward dawn. For in kindness, there is strength, in selflessness, a legacy that outlasts any storm. No matter where the road bends, a single act of compassion can mend what fate frays, turning strangers into family and broken promises into the stuff of legends. Hold fast to your word, friends, it's the truest rope you'll ever throw.